Listeners be advised. The Soliloquy podcast discuss matters related to the human experience and many that are sexual in nature. Due to this, some conversations may surround triggering topics such as sexual violence, self-harm, abuse, and much more. Please be advised, a list of crisis and psychological resources will be available in the show notes of this episode. With that said, let's get started with the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention please as we go through the following safety instructions.
In the event that there is a loss of cabin pressure, oxygen mask will drop from the overhead. Place the mask over your nose and mouth. Breathe normally as oxygen is flowing even if the mask is not inflated. Be sure to adjust your own mask before helping others.
Whew, here we are, season 2 of the damn podcast. And I really do need to be more succinct when it comes to starting these things off. But anyways, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Soliloquy podcast, where we step out and speak on sexuality. This is your favorite host, Vernon T. Scott, also known as Slaytor Jackson, and for you freaky motherfuckers out there, Sebastian Adams. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with a college friend named Ryan, and we're talking about labels. But before we get into that, of course, since it's his first time on the show, we're going to do some introductions so everybody gets to know him, all of the great things that he does, because this man is a wonderful poet. It's not something that he wanted to advertise, but I'm going to say it anyways because he is. But anyways, Ryan, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm fantastic. So, since it's your first time on the podcast, who the fuck are you?
Well, hey, everybody. I'm Ryan Jones, otherwise known as Ryan J. That's like my stage name. I am a Mercer University graduated in 2016 with my bachelor's in environmental engineering and my master's in engineering management. And yeah, I work as an environmental engineer. I do poetry too. In college, I started the inaugural Poetry Slam team over at Mercer University, where we went on and competed at the College Union's Poetry Slam Invitational and placed 20th in the nation in, I believe that was 2013, 2014, one of those 2 years. And then I went on and after college, while I was still doing engineering stuff, I went and competed on some other slam teams, on some adult slam teams, and eventually worked my way into placing 13th in technically the world for individual spoken word, and then quit my job for a year and did some touring. So I've toured the U.S. and parts of Canada doing poetry and stuff. And now I work for a federal agency doing, environmental engineering stuff. I still do poetry on the side occasionally, when I have the time and the space. And then, yeah, I am also in law school doing my thing. I'm currently pursuing a JD and a Master of Public Administration. And I have a two now. My youngest son was just born back in early November. So, yeah, lived what feels like a long life in such a short time span. So,
Yeah, did y'all hear that? This man got accolades. This man is fancy as fuck. Oh my good. Okay, so for the slow motherfuckers out there like myself, what the hell is an environmental engineer?
I would say we're kind of like a subset of civil engineers. Some people go and get an environmental engineering degree, and some people get a civil engineering degree and then go specialize in environmental engineering when they get their master's. But generally speaking, we work in industries like solid waste, so designing landfills, managing waste streams, or we work in water quality or water distribution. So some people go work at wastewater treatment plants, water treatment plants, and do stuff that way. Some people work in remediation, where they go and they clean up historically polluted areas and et cetera, or they go work with FEMA and they do debris cleanup, stuff like that. And then some people like me, they work in regulation where, we basically try to keep polluters and other industry, giants in compliance with, our environmental rules and regulation, both at a, state and federal level. So I used to work for the state of Georgia at one point in time, and then I moved up to federal. So currently work at a federal agency. That I'm not representing them in any capacity, so I can't say their name. But yeah, yeah,
I see.
it ranges. There's environmental engineers do a lot of different stuff, but generally speaking, it all pertains to the environment and making sure that we have an abundance of natural resources available for our use for the rest of forever. Even though that's looking kind of bleak right now, but anyway,
Mm.
this isn't a climate change podcast, so
Well, look, this is a podcast about anything at this point. And like we were saying all of this, all of that, I was just thinking, what do I do for a living? I just talk about sex most of the time. But I love that. Like, this is why it's important to ask, like, what certain fields do, because I would have never known. Like, I imagined or figured that it'd be something dealing with the environment, making sure people
yeah,
are, like, we have the technology to ensure that we do live sustainable lives, that we are respecting our, global economy, our global neighbors, the
yeah,
animals, the water, and all of that. Like, I had a feeling that was part of it, but not in that depth. Most definitely the policy side of things. So, in a way,
right,
you're somewhat of an advocate for climate change,
yeah,
or
yeah, or the
um,
environment at large. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So that's amazing. I love that for you.
I
So,
appreciate it.
is the fact that you work within the policy side of things, is that the reason why you decided to go back to school for law?
Yeah, so kind of, yeah. So what I found really early on, well, yeah, really early on, I used to work for a consulting firm or a couple consulting firms. Realized that you don't have a lot of time, and then consulting firms tend to be out here for the money more so than anything else. They're like, okay, you know what? If I can secure a contract, be it from the government or from some like other large entity, I'll go ahead and take that and make my money, make my profits, and do what I need to do. And so that can include like working for some, pretty unsavory corporations that I'll avoid naming. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'll go work in government. And so I started working in government and then realized when you work in government that unless you have some sort of managerial or like policy experience, that you're not going to get very far or affect very much in like a
Mm,
technical role. And so originally I was like, okay, you know what? I want to be a change maker. So I'm going to go get a master's in public administration, and then realized that because I was trying to avoid getting a JD. I didn't want to go to law school. I was like, I do not want to go to law school. I want to avoid doing that. And then when I was doing the MPA, I was a year in, and I read online for my program, particularly that they had a joint degree that you could do with the law school, where you could do, 1 year of the MPA and 3 or 4 years of the JD and get both degrees. And my first two degrees, my master's and my bachelor's in engineering, were also a joint program. And I was like, well, I've done a joint program before. Like, let me go ahead and do it again and go ahead and just get this JD. I don't know what I'm so afraid of. And then,
mm.
yeah, so I went ahead and got involved so that way I could, get more involved with policy. And then I realized what I was so afraid of was loans. So,
Oh, child. Oh, God.
so, so, so that has got me considering, like what am I going to do when I graduate? So I'm figuring that out right now, whether or not I'm going to do some stuff on the side and still like work in the field that I'm working in, and try to make money while also making change. But we'll see. I've got another 3 semesters to think about it. So
I understand. So, oh, the loans thing just it
yeah.
hit the heart because I would not even be in the program that I am right now if they did not say that they were going to cover my tuition.
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah.
thank God for that scholarship, because like I was like, I've already done all of this schooling. I have loans out the ass, and at the same time, I will say this to the day I die. I don't know who the fuck is paying paying back the government. It's not going to be me. Like I just
Right, right, right.
unless the government just decide to be like, hey, you know what, Vernon, here's $1 million, and I say a million so I could have money for myself because I'm not just if they give me $500,000, I don't
Right,
know if I'm gonna pay off those loans at that point because look, it's fact. I don't know how much. No,
right.
they good. They
So,
good on that.
oh,
So give me $1 million, government. I'll make sure I take care of those loans. That's the only way I'm paying them. Other than that, cancel those shits because I'm not.
listen, I kind of screwed myself over a little bit working for the government. They're like, if you don't pay them back, we're gonna come for it. You know what I'm saying? You work for us. We know where you live. We know, how you get paid. You know what I'm saying? So on paper, I'm going to pay them back. Yes.
I get you. I get you. Look, I work for the state technically, so it's
Yeah.
like y'all do whatever the hell y'all think y'all gonna do.
Yeah. Right. We'll see about it.
Look, they're gonna
Right.
be coming after a hope and a prayer. Look,
Right. Right. A dollar
that's
and a
that's
dream.
it.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
it.
That is fair.
But anyways, we're
Too
supposed to be
fun.
talking about labels. So
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
part of what we were talking about with in the intake meeting was just the concept of coming out and defining yourself.
Right.
So what was your story like in terms of coming out, and do you feel as though like coming out is something that is necessary for people to do, and what does it
Yeah.
mean in terms of defining yourself as it relates to labels too?
Yeah. So I'll start with I don't know that it's necessary for everybody to come out. I think your sexuality just in general is a relation, like it's a personal thing.
Mhm.
It's such a personal item that I don't think you necessarily need to share that with anybody unless you feel it absolutely necessary to share that with people. I know there are a lot of folks who like have family members or societies or environments that they're in that will subject them to harm based on who they are, and in those particular scenarios it may be safer to withhold that information or hold on to it. Like I like very much want people to be able to share that information and live freely and to do what they want with themselves, and not have to be subjugated or like or be treated differently, just based on who they are. But just recognizing the reality of like we don't live in an egalitarian society yet, and because of that fact, sometimes it's better for people to hold on to that information, and then sometimes people just don't want to share that, and that's also okay too. So,
Mhm.
I don't think people necessarily need to come out. I know my own personal story, like, so I had a weird time coming into. So I'm bisexual. I had a weird time coming into my bisexuality. I like, you know, denied it for a second. Definitely spent a lot of time after I realized that maybe I liked boys too, or non-binary people, or trans people, or whomever. I was like, well, I used to tell people I'm somewhere on the sexuality spectrum. I was like, I would consider myself straight, but I'm somewhere on the spectrum, knowing that for me, that meant that I liked people outside of, the traditional like heteronormativity, whatever,
Mhm.
like heteronormative type situations.
The Soliloquy podcast focuses on the variability of sexual expression. When it comes to sexual expression, we often depend on pornography to illustrate how one must perform sexually. For those who have not learned this by now, the stuff you see in porn is not real. Pornography provides a singular perspective of sexual expression that is not often the reality we see during our own sexual encounters. The Soliloquy podcast is a conversation that takes you outside of the compressed box of what many know about sex. Some of the topics we discuss includes kinks, condom usage, status disclosure, and past sexual experiences. The Soliloquy podcast steps out on sexual norms and recognizes that the norm is not the only normal. Subscribe today and join the conversation.
what the traditional like heteronormativity, whatever,
Hmm.
like heteronormative type situations. So I was like, okay, well, yeah, I just told people I was like, I'm somewhere on the spectrum, whatever, like but I would still consider myself straight. And then I realized like later on, like way later, that I was holding on to some hurt about not being able to truly exist as I saw myself, and as I wanted to exist. And so I think it was not this past year, so not 2020, but 2021. Yeah, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of being in a situation where I'm holding on to this information and where I'll watch a piece of media that features queer people and I'll go ask my friends who know I'm queer and be like, hey, do you still remember this? Like I was doing that, right? In order to
Hmm.
get that validation because I was like, I need that validation to affirm my queerness and that, I know other people see me as straight, but I'm still like who I am regardless. And so for me, I was like, well, I need people to know. So I made that decision for myself in June of 2021, Pride Month. I was like, okay, you know what? I'll come out. And I had a friend that came out that same day, and I didn't know he was queer. And I was like, oh, dude, if he can come out as bisexual, I can come out as bisexual. Like, okay. And it's going to be okay. Like, whoever loves me. And whoever doesn't, it's not going to change their mind. Like, whatever. And for the people that, it makes my relationship with them like a little complicated, then maybe we weren't meant to be friends or, or anything at that point. Because I don't want to be friends with people who are, trash about or who are homophobic, transphobic, any of that stuff anyway. So, if they're that about me, then definitely I'm good. So, to come out and honestly speaking, I think it did drive a few people away, but I haven't noticed. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe I lost a follower or two on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or something like that. But those were people that I weren't checking for anyway. Ultimately, and so for me, being able to claim my bisexuality and actually being able to like live in that and being able to label myself that has really allowed myself to live more fully, and really allowed myself to like just kind of be who I am. But like I said, I don't think that's necessarily everybody's truth. And I don't think everybody's going to feel that same way. And it's also not going to be safe for everybody. So I got to reckon with that too. But if you want to, or you have the ability to, I think maybe you should. But I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird concept.
No, I get you. For myself, I don't like the concept of having to come out
Yeah,
because I'm a firm believer of like if unless you want to be in my bedroom, you shouldn't be worried about what the fuck is going on in it.
yeah, yeah,
And if me having a certain sexual expression makes you no longer want to be my friend, no longer want to claim me as a family member, or be a supporter of me, then I don't. I've come to a space mentally, and I've been there for some time now. Professionally, I was not
yeah,
there. I would say that, but personally, I've been there for some time now, where I just don't give a fuck. I don't
yeah,
care
yeah,
exactly how other people see me or how they view me in terms of what they want in their realities, because I can only be myself. I could only live the life that I'm choosing to live, the one that I guess I was predestined to live, or whatever the
yeah.
case is. And I would rather fulfill that my mission, my purpose on this planet, or my wishes in this lifetime. And be happy with it. I don't
Yeah.
want to be in a space where I have to constantly hide a part of myself and be insecure because other people will be uncomfortable. Like one of the things that
Percent.
I loved through like from 2020 to this is going to go into race issues. So anybody, I'm sorry if this offends you, but this is definitely towards like some white people. But well, white people. So the I call it a kink now. It's really not a kink, but the thing that really like excites me these days is being happy as fuck in front of white people and them being
That's fair.
uncomfortable about it. And
Yeah,
like I love it. I love it so
yeah,
much. Like
yeah,
even whenever I decide to express myself in a non traditionally masculine role and I walk outside and I see the other people look at me with disgust or whatever the case is, like when I had my purple and white hair, it was looking fine as fuck. But
yeah.
Even during that time, there were even some black people who will look at me all kinds of way, and I'm just like, "Bitch, why are you upset? Are you mad because you are not pulling this off? Are you mad
Right,
because you don't have the hurt like I have this hurt?
right,
Like, what's
right,
going on? Why are you
right.
feeling some type of way? Like,
Yeah,
just being you and being proud of that, just I feel like that's the space that a lot of people should aim to be in. And like you
yeah,
said, not everyone's in a safe space to come out. And for those individuals, I will always say, get your exit plan together.
yeah,
Find the
yeah,
support in the community that you know will support you. Find the friends that you know will support you regardless, and find
yeah.
your exit plan. Because
Right.
these individuals who may do harm upon you, these people who may, that could be emotional, physical, mental. I don't know why we separate emotional and mental, even though this is still the brain, but
Right.
spiritual, whatever type of harm they may deliver upon you, get yourself out of that situation as soon as you can so you can live a lot more free and happy life.
Right.
And if you decide to come out, then do so. If you decide to just live your life regardless of what other people think, do that. If they come across you 2 years ago, 2 years after you separate from them, and they see that you with a partner that does not fit what they see of your life,
Yeah.
wave
Keep
at
it
them and
pushing.
keep it going.
Keep it pushing. Yeah, and it's interesting to hear you say. I mean, I agree with everything you just said. It's just I'll start off saying that, but it's interesting to hear you say too about your distinction for of like not giving a fuck about your person, like about how people perceive your personal life versus maybe how they perceive your professional life. Is just tagging on to something you said at the very beginning.
Mhm.
Just because, so for me personally, my personal life became my public life, became my professional life when I started doing the poetry thing kind of full time, where, people were, again, adding me on Facebook, following me on Instagram, following me on Twitter. And so much of what I was doing on an everyday basis became a spectacle, right? People were, and I'm not saying like, I'm not trying to be self centered about it, but it's like legitimately who Ryan Jones was or who Ryan J was like the brand moving forward. So a lot of like my hesitation with coming out initially, or a lot of my concern about who, or or who might think what of me, came along with, like, again, being that spectacle. So again, there was a lot of hesitation about coming out because I was like, I don't know how my audience will see this, or how this will affect my bag. I was like, if I come out and people are like, we don't want a bisexual man and da 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 da, then I'm like, okay, where are my bags affected? But at the same time, I had to come to a point that you're kind of describing where I was like, you know what? I don't want to be in situations, scenarios, or spaces where I'm limiting myself, or the audience is limited either. And if they can't accept who I am, regardless of any of the rest of the stuff, if they can't accept who I am, then I don't need to be in that space.
Mhm.
Their money isn't good money. And I came to the eventual conclusion. I can't shuck and jive for dollars that I don't want to spend, or that I don't want anybody to buy me, or buy my silence, or buy my conservativeness. Like I'm not that, and I won't be that, and I can't be that. And so I feel you in that, like, it's important to be able to get to a space where you're like, what, regardless of what other people think about me, or regardless of how they perceive me to be, or how they perceive my life, or the choices that I make, I have to be comfortable in the fact that this makes me happy.
Mhm.
And it took there are some days where I still struggle with that. Definitely with my family members more so than anybody else. But uh, there are still some days where I struggle with that. But it's such an important milestone to reach, and I think I reached that on a personal level, and it's just kind of bringing that into everything else.
Mhm.
And at some point, I guess the person, like I said, the personal kind of bled over into the public. So I guess I'm comfortable in a variety of ways. So, but yeah, no, I agree with you in that if you can live that way, you should, and if you can't live that way now, you should figure out a way how to. And if that means leaving the spaces that aren't safe for you as soon as you're able to, and as soon as it's safe for you to leave those spaces, then that's something you should do, and work to figure out. You
Exactly.
know.
And the I love that you mentioned brand, and the thing that really bothers me most definitely when your personhood becomes a brand
Yeah,
is that people really do forget that you're a human being. Like
yeah, yeah,
you have to maneuver, make these business decisions about your entire personhood. So that
right.
means sometimes you do have to limit yourself. Like this is why I do not ever want to be a celebrity because I don't
Hmm.
if I cannot be myself on a regular basis, I don't want to be it.
Right, right, right,
Like you have to kowtow, make sure that you don't step on certain toes in order for you to further your brand, which is yourself. And
right.
like part of the reasons why I even have these different personas that I name off at the beginning of each episode is because one, Vernon maneuvers a lot more differently than I will have to maneuver as Slater Jackson, as the head of Slater's Playhouse, versus
Yeah,
Sebastian Adams in terms of sex coaching and any kind of content that I might produce for that. So it's like I do have to dissect myself in different ways, but at the
yeah,
same time, I have to remember within these spaces, within these personas, I still have to remember to acknowledge and appreciate me for my wholeness. And if
yeah,
a certain business or company or anything like that, supporter does not appreciate that or want that authenticity, then it's just something I cannot provide.
right,
Like in terms
right,
of like a business brand, a fixture, a solid theme that's not me. Oh yeah, that can be whatever the brand needs to be for that. But when it's stuck on my persona or even like others personas, it's like why do we have that expectation that this person is going to fit in this said box?
right,
Why do we not give them the freedom to expand themselves, talk on different issues,
right,
allow themselves to be outside of that label of athlete, coach, teacher, professor, politician, whatever it is, poet, um, engineer, environmental engineer, to be exact. But why
right,
why
right,
do we have to put them in that one box rather than recognizing that this person it has a lot of nuance to them, and that
right,
nuance can be respected and understood if we so choose to.
right, right. Yeah, I agree with you.
But on a different note, something else that we did talk about was how others place labels upon us.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the labels that you've noticed that people placed upon you that doesn't really suit you, or just in general? Like, what was your experience like with others placing labels on you?
Yeah, so particularly when it comes to, well, man, so it's interesting talking about this in the context of sexuality because that means one thing versus talking
Mhm.
about it in the context of like race, for example.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm black if y'all can't tell. I understand
He's
that
Negroid.
that's yes, I am I am of Negro descent. Um, but that was growing up a lot. It was interesting. I guess this all kind of plays into it. All kind of associates itself with one another at some point. But like growing up, I would get called, you know, Oreo, not black, etc. Like those type of labels by white people, which was
Mm.
interesting. Not by black people. It's funny. I always hear like black folks being like, the black folks didn't accept me, but it's like for my experience was totally different. Black people were like, "You're just weird, but it's okay because we're weird too," versus like white people growing up were very much like, "Yo, you are like not black, and you're not as black as I am, or you're an Oreo, or da da da. Robert's blacker than you." I got that a couple of times. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a weird labeling growing up. That was never weird to me because you can't define blackness in one way and the characteristics that people use to define blackness are generally like stereotypical, and there's nothing wrong with, I think, some of those characteristics or even all of them. I don't think there's anything wrong with them and when you take them individually, but it was just weird to hear that from somebody who doesn't have a concept of blackness because they don't experience that on a daily basis.
Mm.
And then transitioning that into college, where I'll just go ahead and age all the way up to college, where it was like, okay, word, like I found my place like among these. If you don't know anything about Mercer University, Mercer, at least when we went to Mercer, was segregated, very, very
That's
segregated.
hell.
Very, very segregated, where it was, there were a couple people who were able to, I guess, you know, uh, play both sides almost, or exist in both spaces.
Hmm.
But the majority of Black folks were with Black folks. The majority of, I think I would say like the Latinx Hispanic community, I think they hung out with Black folks more than they didn't. I think the Asians kind of stuck together. White people definitely were doing what they were doing. But it was, yeah, it was a segregated mess. But here, so I was like, I found my place among Black people, whatever. But I got a lot of like, in college, I got a lot of like, oh, I thought you were only into white girls, which was interesting to me too, because that was like, up to that point, I had only dated Black women and only been involved with Black women. And so I was like, I don't understand too, how that's something that you're gathering from how I present myself. And then also, how does that relate to how white people saw me as not being Black enough, or eventually that transitioning into me being one of like the less threatening Black guys, right? Like how does that all kind of like fit in together or play together? Is that something that like, or do those two ideas connect somehow? Is there something that like threads those two ideas together? I thought that was interesting. Eventually, like people stopped saying that once they realized I did poetry, and all my poetry was about, like, at the time,
Black
was about police
issues.
brutality. Yeah, about Black issues. They were like, oh, okay, never mind, you're a nigga. And I was like, okay, like, you know,
Now I get
people let that.
now I get it. Okay.
Right, right, right. And I was like, okay, whatever. Yeah. And it was whatever then too. I didn't get offended necessarily. I was just like, I'm just wondering what y'all see that I don't see, because I don't even know how to talk to white women. And then, moving on from that point and coming out of college, and then ending up like in a situation where, one, I come out as bi. So there's already those like stigmas and labels attached to that. And I promise I'm making a point here.
Oh no, you're
Um,
good.
yeah, yeah. There's all those stigmas attached to that, where, the Black community is real weird, where, Black people as a whole haven't gotten to the point to where we're able to, like, again, as a whole, as a community, recognize that sexuality is a spectrum, and not even necessarily a spectrum in the way that we think, where it's like linear, as much as it's
Mhm.
like a 3D plane, right? Where there's
Mm.
an X, Y, and a Z axis, and people exist anywhere in that plane or whatever, or that space, that sphere, more so than anything else. And then, so I got a lot of like, oh, or I heard a lot of, oh, if he's bi, that automatically means he's gay. There was that.
Mm.
um, a lot of that. And then when I eventually did get married, I married somebody who's mixed white and Native American. And when I married her, again, it was weird up until that point. Like I said, I had never really been in like serious relationships with white women, and then I met my wife, and she's like half white. And so, and again, I'm going to relate this back. I Once I married her, I also started hearing a lot of, oh, one, you can't be pro-black unless you marry
Mm.
black, or unless you're involved with black, a black person or in a black relationship. And then two, only bisexual, like, or most bisexual, most men that are involved with white women that are black are bisexual in some shape, form, or fashion. I've heard a lot of that, which was weird to me, again, because I'm like, one, so from Jump Street, right? Sorry, you can hear my son kind of
I know
doing his
you're
thing.
good. You're good. Let the baby
uh,
be the baby.
but it's like, so one, from Jump Street, okay, I got, you're not black enough. Two, I think you date I think you only date white women. And then now three, now that it's confirmed that you date white women or married to white women, you're likely to be bisexual. And it's like, okay, again, were y'all calling me like bisexual or gay from Jump Street? Like, if that's what you think that, that train of logic is, and then two, like, where's this coming from? Where's all this, like, I get black. I get black love. I get wanting to marry black. I get wanting to maintain a black community. Listen, I was about to say something. I'm not even going to say that. I'll say it, and you can decide if you want to cut it out or not.
I'm not going to. Go ahead and say what you need to say.
Oh, dang. Okay. I, dang. Okay, I'm gonna say this in as nice as I can say it. I told my wife straight up, like even after marrying her, I was like, listen, I've got a quota on the number of white people I want in my life. You know,
Mhm.
I want my space, and this that's not a real quota for anybody that's listening that wants to take that and
And run with it.
uh, and run with it. Right? I'm just saying, I want most of my spaces to be primarily people of color, and even more so, like more specifically, I want them to be primarily black. I want my sons to grow up in black environments or to be surrounded by black people, so that way they're in touch with their blackness. I want to exist that way. So, and I want to support the black community. I want all my dollars to go into the black community. I very much want my existence to be that. I fell in love with who I fell in love with, but that doesn't change any of the rest of my views. So I don't get how that labeling of like being in an interracial relationship may, changes into you're not pro-black. And then my sexuality be damned. Like, yeah, of course I'm bisexual. I'm not going to deny that. But like half of the people I know, half the niggas that are involved with white women aren't. A
Mhm.
lot. There are a lot of black men who are involved with white women, Hispanic women, Indian, Southeast Asian women, across the gambit in interracial relationships that aren't bisexual or that aren't, that aren't DL or whatever or any of that. And even if they are, why is it your deal? Why is it your it's just such an interesting conversation. I think, that kind of plagues me if I think too hard about it, but I try not to think too hard about it because I'm like, again, I'm doing my own thing at the end of the day, and regardless of whether or not you feel like I'm supporting you, I am. But still, it's just weird.
I
Yeah,
agree with you 100%. Like I've seen those arguments, and like I know a lot of this stems from like ignorance alone,
yeah,
but at the
yeah.
same time, we're at a point where there's so many people who have the right information, and we're choosing ignorance. Like this is why
Right.
I will forever say ignorance is a choice because you literally have to choose that shit. Like
Yeah.
with all the information from reputable sources, from people who work in the fields that you're asking these questions about, and you still act as though, oh no, I know better than you.
Right.
How? Like, what the
Right.
fuck? Like
Right.
the fact, like, it really bothers me with the because we're going to end up talking about this in more detail soon about bi erasure, but within black spaces, because I've had to have this argument before, and this was actually during the protests after George Floyd's death,
Hmm.
where I was in a Facebook group, and I'm thinking that it's all about supporting the Black community, regardless of what your gender identity is, what your sexuality is. I'm thinking this is a truly pro-Black platform that I'm joining, and it was by from a friend from high school. Well, I can't say a friend, but we knew each other back in high school.
Okay.
So there was this situation that was going on where you remember when Tony McDade passed away. Well, when he was murdered by the police,
Hmm.
and this is a trans black man, and so there was a point where people was just like, trans lives matter as well. And then you have, well, Black trans lives matter. And then I seeing in this group me, not group me, this group where people take a picture from a protest with that image of a sign that says that. And under the comments, they're talking about all Black lives matter. And I'm like, do y'all not see how you're all lives mattering this situation? Like
Right.
we
Right.
step out and say that the reason why we have to say Black lives matter is because on a spectrum of things, we do not. And
Yeah. Yeah.
you erase that value of that statement by saying all lives matter. And here we are doing the same thing for those people who are in the trans community. But within that argument, I was like, but it makes sense. Like, you all are literally all lives mattering this message. Like, you're not
Right.
taking the time to understand what's going on. And then there was this black man who was like, well, no, actually, it was the person from high school first. She
Hmm.
was like, "Well, I don't see why we have to support the queer community, blah 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 blah." And I was like, "Because queer people are black. Like black
Right.
people can be queer." And then
Right.
somebody was like, "Well, you all have more privileges than we do. Y'all are closer to whiteness." I was like, "Bitch,
Oh,
where?
whoa. Yeah.
Bitch,
Where
the
did that come
fuck?
from? Right.
Where?"
Right. Right. Left field on that one. That's yeah. Yeah.
I was
What?
like, excuse you, do you not know how often queer people are disrespected within the black community?
Right.
Like, I've been called nigger by white people and faggot by white people, and I've
Yeah.
also been called those same things by black people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's nothing to say that like we're not closer to whiteness. We still are oppressed around here, people.
Right.
Like we're all
Right.
living the same struggle. People see my color of my skin first before they see anything about who the fuck I'm sleeping with. Yeah,
First and foremost. Right.
that is still the issue. But when it comes to the intersectional identities, we're still being oppressed within our own community. Look at what
Right.
we're doing here. You just literally othered me within an argument about Black lives and how they're
Right.
supposed to be important. So you're telling me my life is more important when there's literally queer people being murdered by people within our same community, are other people within our community murdering,
Right.
queer people just for coming out.
Right. Right.
So
Right. Right.
there's a reason why people are DL. There's a reason why people choose not to tell other people what they do sexually because they're afraid of being murdered
Right.
by the
Right.
people that they care about.
Right.
So this stuff happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it always bothers me. And then to say that because a person is dating somebody who's of a different race, they are not pro-black. How does that make sense?
Right.
How
That
how
question.
how does me dating somebody change the fact that I'm black?
Right.
What
One.
privileges do I get?
Right. Right. Yeah. Because it's like at the end of the day, that's still your identity, right? It's like nothing about your identity changes, regardless. And it's like I think we understand in other contexts, time and time again, that our proximity to whiteness or our proximity to other races doesn't change who we are. It's like we can look at what is it? There's that episode of Fresh Prince, and or maybe I might be misthinking, but I feel like it might be an episode of Fresh Prince where Carlton experiences racism and is like, why
Mm,
would they treat me that way? And he thought his proximity to whiteness, would change how people see him because he's a black guy who acted a certain way
mhm.
or associated with certain people. So it's like we can. Ooh,
Aw.
sorry. So it's like we can understand that in that context, right? Where it's like, oh, of course Carlton wouldn't be treated any differently. He's still black in a white environment. Like he's still black. But then when we start thinking about relationships, for some reason, we kind of suspend our I don't want to say suspend our disbelief. That's the wrong phrase, but we kind of like change up a little bit. We kind of
Mhm.
like start thinking about it differently where we're like, oh, their proximity to whiteness or their proximity to another race is going to, afford them other privileges that I don't have because I have a black partner. It's like I get it, right? Like two
Mhm.
black people makes the situation a little bit more dangerous, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I stop being black. That just means my situation changes. Um,
Exactly. And
yeah,
I think people also forget that regardless of what the community label is, be it anime community, queer community, whatever, when you go across racial lines, that racism is still there. It's just that
right,
you just happen to be a part of a subsect of a different community based off of your identity. That's the only thing that's different. That skin
right,
tone will still be there.
right,
Like even when it comes to colorism, at the end of the day, these people still know, oh, that's a black person that's in that position. We're not going
right,
to really treat them as better than other people. We're
right,
just at least having that facade that, oh, at least their skin tone is acceptable because they're not that Negro.
right, right, right.
So
It's it's crazy stuff, man.
like,
I just don't understand it.
it's annoying. I
Yeah.
hope we do get to a point where we do have this family reunion and like have these conversations. Of course, some blows might be passed away because motherfuckers need to get punched in the jaw. Like
Every once in a while.
I'm not trying to say that I'm an advocate for violence, but sometimes violence do solve problems. I've seen it happen, and at times when you tell somebody something repeatedly over and over and over again, and it's just, and you change the message, you change the
Right.
messenger, you even go to the somebody that they trust the most. Sometimes you just have to slap some sense into some people, just a little tap, a little love tap, that's all. Nobody's saying that you need to beat their ass and leave them bloody. No, just a little love tap, that's all. Just like wake up, that's all. Wake them up a little bit. So it happens at family reunions, okay, y'all. Whoever
Right.
wants to judge and be like, "Oh my God, Vernon's violent," blah 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 blah. No, no. Look, we all have different experiences of violence. We all have different people in our families that we've experienced who had to get violent, and you was like, you know what, that was somewhat justified. That's all what's happening here. That's all. It's justified. We ain't killing nobody. We ain't murdering people. We're just laying a holy hand of togetherness and uplift and learning. That's all. It's a love tap.
Can we
Oh,
take like 5 seconds? Is that okay?
oh yeah.
Let me get him to calm down some. I don't want to interrupt everything else.
You're fine.
Yeah. I was like, let me go ahead and mute because he started fussing. I was like, yeah. Here, buddy. Here, buddy. Okay. Pacifier. There we go. So, here you go, little man. Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. You're good. We love babies. Are you ready to get started back up?
Yes. Yep.
All right. So, on that note, the other thing that I did want to touch base on before I do end this episode is bi erasure. Talked a little bit about it within my little rant, as well as in your rant about how people just, like, oh, I'm bi. Oh, that means you're gay, but
Right.
that's not the
Right.
case. So, what was your experience like as it pertains to bi erasure?
So again, having only come out like a year ago, it's been kind of limited. And outside of the sense of like, again, witnessing other people kind of engage in that kind of conversation and that type of dialogue of like, it's been a lot of fighting back against that as a person who was closeted for so long.
Mhm.
Of being like, well, I don't think that's necessarily how things are, or I think you're misunderstanding things, or my first my first instinct is to be as diplomatic as possible when it comes to those types of situations, even though, like you
Mhm.
said, sometimes that's not the best way to handle things. But luckily, I exist in a community or within a group that has been relatively accepting. Most of any of that erasure I encounter is online. Again, mostly people who aren't able to recognize that sexuality isn't just a binary, and that it doesn't, and that yeah, people don't just hit a switch and they're like, okay, you know what? Oh, I've like sucked a dick once. That means that's the only thing I'll ever do again for the rest of my life. Like, or with women, like the other way around, but which is a totally separate conversation, I know, just because I think we allow women to be bisexual and to experience that range of sexuality, but generally from a man's perspective, it tends to be as a way to exploit that in some shape,
Mhm.
form, or fashion. They're like, okay, you know what? I love it if my woman's into other women because that means I get to have a threesome, and it's like that's its own weird conversation. But
Yeah.
with men in particular, yeah, it just becomes a lot of like, yeah, if you've ever even thought about a man or ever had a crush on another guy, yeah, that's it for you.
There's no turning
Or
back.
right, there's no turning back. Or, you know, well, yeah, no, there's just a lot of that. I think that's really most of what I've seen, and most of what I've experienced is that line of conversation within the community. And outside of the community, yeah, like I said, I'm just really grateful to exist in a community of people that really does support and are really interested in making sure everybody feels seen. So there hasn't been too much vitriol in that way. I'm
Well,
outside of that,
that
Yeah.
is wonderful. I will say, well, at least in terms of like my social media and whatnot, because I've learned to curate for real.
Yeah.
In terms of who you do want to allow access to your information, your personal life, and things like that. Granted, I don't be on social media as much as I used to, anyways, but still, it's good to still have those people that even if you do check in on social media, you're not feeling bashed for the most part.
Yeah.
And like I would say even yesterday, I actually experienced some bi erasure.
Oh,
And
really?
this was someone who identified as straight
Mhm.
and been trying to hook up with me for like the last couple months or wherever. And for me, if a person flakes on me, I'm just done with them. I'm
Right.
just
Right.
extremely done. But I was like, whatever. If you actually do show up, then we can possibly hook up. I don't care, whatever. But when they got to my apartment, he kept calling me gay and whatnot. I was like, but dude, I'm not gay. I'm bi
Right.
as fuck.
Right.
And he was like, man, that don't exist. I was like,
What
what?
do you mean? Yeah. What are you
What do you
talking about?
mean? So you
Yeah.
telling me like within that mindset, you coming over here identifying as straight and wanting to have sex with me, a man, what does that make you?
Right.
If bisexual does not exist,
Right.
now there is this thing, hetero flexible, what have you, but at the same time, you're here.
Right.
So, are you
Right.
going to take a moment to reevaluate what your identity is in terms of sexuality, or you're just going to continue to live a life of just whatever? Like
Just your ignorance. Yeah.
it's okay
Yeah.
to educate yourself on different perspectives, different lived experiences, and to deny the existence of somebody solely because you don't understand it does not make sense. That's just pure ignorance.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like I don't get like I agree with you when it comes to the difference in how it is portrayed towards women versus men. Like if you are a woman, you do have that, though women are oppressed a lot in terms of how they
Yes.
can express themselves sexually because you
Yes.
cannot be sexually free and be a woman.
Right.
But at the
Right.
same time, women are given that grace to be
Yeah.
explorative with their sexuality, so long as it's with another woman, not
Right.
multiple men.
Right. Right.
And then for men, of course, you have that freedom to fuck as many women as you want. But if you dare to explore sex with another man, you're automatically gay.
Right. Well, okay. So, okay, I'm glad we're here. So, what's been interesting to me too, I was having a conversation, or I don't know if I was having this conversation or if I was witnessing this conversation as it was taking place, but and it may have been on Twitter. Somebody was talking about speaking of threesomes. They're like, oh, you and your homeboy will go and run, like quote unquote, run a train on somebody,
Hmm.
but you don't consider that as like having a sexual experience with your homeboy. Like both of you guys are like legitimately engaged in a sexual act together with another person, but you're not considering that to be like any like it doesn't change who you are, or it doesn't move you on the spectrum at all, or it doesn't do any. So I thought that was interesting too,
Hmm.
where it's like I think there are certain instances where men allow themselves to exist in a sexual space with other men, but then they still view it like with blinders on, where it's like, okay, this is still a strictly heterosexual experience because I'm having sex with this woman. And it's like, no, dude, like your other dude is there having sex too. And
Hmm.
like that's something that you're doing like with them. And that's, that again, yeah, it's weird. It's weird how we put our blinders on for stuff like that, or how they put their
Exactly.
blinders on for stuff like that.
Exactly. Like
Um,
that
yeah,
entire encounter is considered a sexual experience. It's not, oh,
yeah,
I just came and now it's over. No. If it's still ongoing, it's your sexual experience until you fucking leave.
right,
But while
right,
it's ongoing, fam, you're having sex with other people. It might
right,
just be you're penetrating one person, but you're having sex with other individuals in that room. Y'all
right,
are engaged in a sexual encounter.
right.
Like, I'm not going to say just because you're doing that, you're gay or you're queer or you're bi.
No,
You
right,
can still be heterosexual, but you still had sex with men present. And that's
right.
fine. That is okay. But it's just so weird.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, it's
like
odd.
I've heard of men who are comfortable with doing something like that, but are not comfortable with having a threesome with another man that's in the room. And I'm like,
Yeah,
but isn't that essentially the same
it's the
thing?
same thing.
It's just
But it's the same thing. What are you talking about? Yeah, yeah,
no, there's you don't have to engage with that other person in terms of like tickling his balls, sucking his dick, and anything like that. You really don't
right,
have to do that. But
right,
if you so choose, then go with the flow. Like for me, I cannot be within an environment where a train is being ran if I'm not going to be engaged with the other people in the damn room too,
right,
because it's
right,
like
right,
we all here. There's sexual energy here, and I want to explore everybody that's here. Like, what's the fuck?
right,
What's up? Let's do some
right.
shit.
If you can't move between cars, if you can't move between cars of that train, you're not interested.
Exactly, exactly. Like we are here for some whole shit. In the whole, we just unlocked a new feature, motherfuckers.
Right,
I
right,
unlocked some shit, and I'm trying to utilize these perks before it runs out.
right, right.
This is a limited time upgrade for 30 minutes. I'm trying to use this. I paid for this shit. When you play these games, you like buy that one little perk and you
Right,
only
right,
have a certain amount of
right,
time to use it. I'm trying
right.
to use this shit. Let me
It's
use
a
my
power up.
motherfucking perk.
That's
A power up, yes.
oh no,
you know,
crazy.
this episode
But
title is literally going to be Negroids with power ups. That's what it is.
yeah, fair, fair. Yeah, yeah, man. No, but I agree with you. It's like why enter into the room that you're about with people be open like that, and then or engaging with everybody. What you want is a heterosexual like encounter. What you should probably do is go have a heterosexual encounter
Mm,
and have sex with the person that you believe is your opposite sex and have that be it. But if that's not what you're looking for, then be open to the possibility that what you're about to do or what you're doing at that point in time isn't really, straight in the way that you yeah.
yeah,
But
it's
yeah, and
definitely.
then I did want to do my support for what you said about like not being able to exist freely, and sexually, et cetera, and be able to express themselves sexually. Very correct about that. And I hope misconstrued what I was saying about how men perceive bisexuality and women being allowed to be bisexual in that way. Because you're right. You're very much correct about that. About the fact that women, generally speaking, across the world, even aren't allowed to express themselves, and their sexuality in the same way that men are. And then when they are, and they are allowed to explore that, men take advantage of that, and it's
Mm.
problematic. But yeah, I did want to.
And I think just to even go off of that, another thing is to remember that women do perpetuate these things too.
Yeah,
Because I've seen like, oh, the episode of Insecure when old dude mentioned to Molly, and Molly was my favorite character in Insecure.
really.
I forgot old dude's name though, but when he mentioned that, oh yeah, back in college or back in high school, I did like fool around with the dude, and he was like, I didn't like it, but it happened, and that is the thing that ruined their relationship is because she became
Yeah,
uncomfortable, assumed that he's gay and all these other stuff, and not allow him to have that freedom to express himself sexually. Like these
fair.
kind of things happen. Like I even had to have a conversation. This was Instagram, and I told myself I'm going to stop having these arguments with people on the internet. But I'm a fan of Chica, and I don't listen to all of her music, but I love everything that she does, and she has such a very vibrant spirit. I just love this woman. But
Yeah,
when she was like, I think the tweet was something about black women, we have to like come to a conclusion that bisexual men are okay. Like
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with dating a bisexual man. And somebody was under the comments, loud and wrong, Lord. Talking about, oh, if my husband ever do anything like that, well, she was engaged, or she's engaged to a man. And she
Okay.
was like, if he ever does anything like that, then our engagement is over. And I was like, why not? Why ruin your engagement just because he had sex with the dude once? Like,
Right.
there's no
Right.
reason to do that. Like, let your man be him. It doesn't make him less of a man because he had sex with another man.
Right. Right. At all. Yeah. And it's such a what's that like? People have been popularizing that meme where from For Colored Girls. I think it's from For
Mm,
Colored Girls, the Tyler
yep.
Perry version, where it's like, oh, so you're doing the bending? Like it's
Hmm.
like stuff like that, right? Where it's like, okay, dude, like again, like you just said, it doesn't change who that person is just because they may have quote unquote done the bending. Like uh, like like they're still you love them, right? You the person that you fell in love with, they're still, they're still masculine if that's who they are.
Mm,
It doesn't change anything about that person. But I don't know. I really do hope we kind of liberate ourselves from the idea that or from homophobia really more so than anything else.
mhm.
And there's a whole conversation in there about, well, and I'll how deep do you want to get into this? Because I was
So, the only thing, because I can do a whole damn episode just about that damn for color girl scenes, and I might even just do something on Instagram today. But the only thing is we are running out of time on this
okay,
this
okay,
episode, so we
okay.
can't
I
go
want
as
yeah,
deep. But
yeah, okay. I'll leave it alone.
this might be the first part two episode of the damn podcast because it needs to be talked about. So let's do that. Let's do that because I know we had another episode lined up. But
Yeah,
we're going to do a part two of this. So we're going to put a pin in
okay.
that as well as bring back this for color girls situation because we got to talk about it. Um,
Insane.
but I have one never have I ever. Well, we could do two, one or two. We'll do that in the episode, and then we doing this part two. So
Okay, plan.
you noted what you were where you wanted to go on that?
Huh?
I said, have you noted where you wanted to go in terms of this conversation?
Oh yeah, yeah. If you bring up the for color girl scene, then I can remember it again.
All right,
It'll be good.
bet.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so never have I ever tried tantric sex.
Oh, I would raise my hand here, or put down a finger.
Oh, so you have?
No, no, I have not. The other
Oh,
way
you
around.
have not? Oh, got you. I haven't either. Do you know what tantric sex is?
So my only like knowledge of it stems from the fact that the one of the Barney performers used to be became a tantric sex person, like a tantric sex like guide after he stopped performing. So that's
Okay.
about as much knowledge as I have of.
I think I'm still learning more about it, tantra and tantric sex and whatnot.
Yeah.
And what I gather is that it's a lot about energy and the like exchange of energy between you and your partner and whatnot.
Okay.
Um, I think it's supposed to be something with intimacy as well. But my only thing is when it comes to like even the program I'm in to learn these new things about sexuality and tantra and everything, I have to
Mhm.
remember where I'm getting this information from, like who's my original my source of
Yeah.
information.
Right.
And oftentimes it's Eurocentric, and this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not a Eurocentric thing, a Eurocentric concept.
Yeah.
So I'm using that for the base knowledge, but I'm planning on going further by educating myself in terms of like cultural significance within like
Yeah.
India and whatnot. But from my
Yeah.
understanding, it's a lot about it, the energy that we exchange during sexual acts as well as non-physical sexual acts.
Right. Right. Okay, well that's interesting. No, I need to do my own research too. I like I said, I don't know too much about it, but that sounds interesting and sounds like it could be fun and for everybody involved.
Right.
Might have something to try.
I need to find somebody who's like a Reiki specialist because I'm trying to do some shit. Like fuck around fuck me with my energies, bitch. That's all I'm saying.
Right, right,
I'm okay. I
crazy.
just want to see what this is about.
Right, right, right. Just want to know.
Like
Yeah.
you could heal my chakras today too while you at it, but I just need to see what this energetic sex is about.
Right, right.
But
Crazy.
anyways, I'm going to let that be the last part of this show. So, do you have any last words that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, no, if well, what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, I think you made a really good point, Vernon, about if you are or in a space where you feel like you are potentially subject to harm if you were to come out or to like truly be yourself, know that there are people and communities that will be accepting of you and that do care about you and are interested in seeing you live your life to the fullest and seeing you express like the totality of who you are and come into yourself. And things may seem rough right now, or the spaces that you may seem places that you exist in may seem rough right now, but know that there are greener pastures. And there are of course pastures that may seem greener but aren't. But ultimately, there are communities that are willing and ready for your presence. And so I hope anybody who finds themselves in that type of situation is able to, plan an exit strategy and then work their way outwards and find a space where they belong and where they can truly, be themselves. And if you're looking for somebody to talk to, you can always hit me up. Instagram or Twitter at Go Home Ryan. So yeah, I'm not always the best at conversation, but I can always point you into some resources. So that way you can find what you're looking for.
Amen. That is a beautiful message. Also, I always loved your handle, by the way, because
Thank you.
it's from Sister Sisters. It's just
Yep.
it hits at the heart. So it's always been a love.
I appreciate it.
So on that note, you all, well, first, thank you so much, Ryan, for coming on to the podcast. I
Yeah,
greatly appreciate you.
yeah. Thank you for
Um,
having me.
for the listeners, thank you all so much for listening to the Holy podcast, where we step out and speak on sexuality. Just in case no one else told you this today, you are beautiful, you are worthy of happiness and joy, you are enough and then some. You may not live up to the expectations of others, but that is okay. You are only required to walk in your own shoes. May each day you live lead you towards abundance. With that said, love you all and see you next episode. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Holiloquy podcast, where we step out and speak on sexuality. You can subscribe to the podcast through your favorite podcasting app and find us on the web at www.holiloquy.com. That's www.heauxliloquy.com. Share the podcast with your friends and join the conversation.